We might be thinking that we're living into our true core values, the nature of who we are, but when in reality, we may have been adopting some sacred cows. There may be things in your own life that may have worked once for you in your life, but maybe they don't necessarily work anymore. Those sacred cows feel like they're values to us, but in reality, they're veiled. They're actually going against the true core value. The core values are really about alignment around what you want to be and what you want to represent in the world. Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. I'm so glad you're here today. My name is Adam Hill. I will be your host, and today on this solo episode, I want to talk about something that is really important to making sure that we can move forward in spite of our fears and achieve that greater flow and just live in alignment with our purpose and what we want to represent in this world. And that is our core values. And core values there is a bit of a buzzword right now, especially in business. You know, we talk about core values a lot, but it's also very important. I mean, a lot of times the things that we start to talk about a lot in the world become important things, and core values are one of those things. And they're vital not only in our business, but they're also vital in our personal lives to make sure that we are living in alignment with our true selves. But the context in which I want to talk about our core values today, and we'll get to a point where I'll share with you how to identify your core values and start to live more in alignment with them. But the reason I want to talk about them today is because a lot of times we might be thinking that we're living into our true core values, the nature of who we are. But when in reality, we may have been adopting some sacred cows. And sacred cows, core values, there's a subtle and very important difference between the two. A vital difference, and they're wildly different things, but they're very easy to confuse, and very easy to move from one into the other. And I'll kind of share what I mean by sacred cows by sharing a story. In my day job, I run a fourth generation family chemical company, family business that has been around for 100 years. That's a long time, and there's a long legacy in that. And there's a ton of value. There's a ton of pride in this company and the legacy that we've built and what we've become to our communities. And for about the past 6 years, I've been the CEO of this company and been in this company for about 20 years. And of course, for my entire life, I've really grown up in this company. And you know, we have a strong legacy within the communities we serve and with our customers and with our employees and there's a lot of value and a lot of wonderful things about that. However, and this is a big but, you know, within legacy, with a long enough time frame, you know, you can develop habits, of course, and develop behaviors and values that eventually turn into anchors in your company and your life that might actually be not just driving you forward or be acting as values in your company, but they might actually be holding you back. And these are certain things, you know, that we've seen in our own business, things that may have worked at one time in the history of the company, maybe in the 1960s, but don't necessarily work anymore. And there may be things in your own life that may have worked once for you in your life, but maybe they don't necessarily work anymore. You know, in a company, you could think of things like maybe you have a certain line of business that you've been operating in since the very beginning of your company. Maybe you've been selling these widgets that were so wonderful when you started the business, and everybody wanted them, and they just basically were your flagship product. But today, they're not performing as well. They're not performing so well. They're actually holding you back. They may not have a real particular use anymore, but you're selling them. You know, think about Kodak and the idea of film and the idea that they didn't want to move to digital. I mean, that was a sacred cow that held them back, that turned into an anchor. You know, in your personal life, it may be that you might be anchored to some beliefs or feelings in your life that you don't want to change because they're just anchoring, but it's causing you to not want to change. Maybe it's maybe it's an addiction that you have. So certainly for me, I believed that I was a connoisseur of fine wine, that I valued really fine quality alcohol. But in reality, I was an alcoholic. And that was an anchor. That's an extreme example of that. And there are other examples that aren't so extreme, but a lot more subtle. But consider in your own life where you might have these things that you might believe that you value, but that are actually holding you back. This is a very careful exercise because you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't want to throw out your core values and say and start from scratch. Core values are something that you want imprinted in your life and that you want them to lead you forward. And so I want to give you a few ways in which you can maybe think about the sacred cows in your life and the core values so that you can begin to identify, what's not working in your life. And because, those sacred cows that we develop, a lot of times we develop those sacred cows around the things that we feel like we need to believe. Maybe they were passed down generationally that we need to believe about something. Maybe we value a certain thing about, about the world that we live in. Maybe it's feelings about gun control, or maybe it's feelings about certain societal things that we're locked into that we just need to look more closely at. Holding those beliefs a little bit more loosely and then really distinguishing those from your core values might begin to identify where, you can let go or start to break the anchors of those sacred cows that might be holding you back. And the way to think about that is that are there certain things that by believing them so strongly that they're causing you anxiety or fear? Or that they're causing, or you're feeling like they're holding you back, or that you're feeling some kind of gut level conflict internally with yourself. Certainly, I felt that with regard to my alcoholism. This idea that I didn't want to let go of being somebody that loved the idea of drinking with friends, or enjoying really great beer or really great wine, and then just to really change my life around that. There was such an internal conflict around that. Even though I knew it was problematic and it was causing me pain, it became a sacred cow to me. And I couldn't break it. And I struggled with breaking it. And it led to deep internal turmoil. A lot of times those sacred cows feel like they're superficially feel like they're values to us. But in reality, they're veiled, and they're actually going against a true core value that we might have. They go against your ability to actually find out who you truly are. And when we can unanchor those things, when we can break the anchor to them, and we can start moving forward with our core value, we find that we move forward much more quickly with greater conviction. And it just takes a little bit of work and a little bit of open-mindedness. So when we think about those, when we think about those core values, so here's the interesting thing about sacred cows and core values is that regardless of what you say your values are or your sacred cows, your true values, and these are the things you want to get to the deep root of, are going to be practiced and reinforced during the peaks and valleys of your life. Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey. When the great things are happening in your life, when things are going good, you'll feel the emotions around the things that you value. And then when you're in your valley, when you're in the worst of times, when you're most desperate, that's when your values start to come to the surface, when truly what you value comes to the surface. And it's important to really take ownership of whatever those things are so that you can start to use them in a more powerful way. Values, core values. This is the difference between core values and sacred cows, is that core values are really about alignment around what you want to be and what you want to represent in the world. And they're expansive. They actually expand out. The more that you want to grow, they may feel like they're a boundary in which you want to, in which you grow, and in a way that they are, but they're also expansive. They create abundance within a specific criteria. So if you value, say, adventure in your life, and there's that specific boundary or criteria that you set that you value adventure, there's an abundance that exists when you chase adventure and you bring more energy to your life. Values are also pretty difficult to cultivate, but they're worth it when you do. They're really hard to practice. Core values are often hard to practice because you have to say no to a lot of things that might otherwise entice you to live into those core values, but they're rewarding and they're for the greater good of you and the culture that you represent. Sacred cows, on the other hand, are often more about avoidance. Sacred cows, often when you set those sacred cows, it's about doing things the way you've always done it. And if you've ever worked in a company where, they've said those words that, why do we still do things this way? Well, because that's the way we've always done it. That's kind of a cop out excuse, isn't it? And it's all about avoidance. You're avoiding the true nature, the true root issue that's leading you to anchor into that, which maybe we need to say no to this certain thing, or we may need to let go of this specific idea, or we may need to let go of this specific person. And the same is true for us. When somebody challenges maybe, or we challenge ourselves on a sacred cow, we might just say, well, that's the way we've always done it, or that's the way I've always done it. And just, that's it. We avoid it, and we avoid acknowledging it. It's a sacred cow. And sacred cows are also really kind of unnecessarily restrictive, and they create scarcity. If you think about, those sacred cows that you might have in your workplace or in your own life. When I was drinking, I felt like I was creating freedom when I drank, right? I felt like I was creating freedom for myself when I drank, but in reality, I was being unnecessarily restrictive. I was isolating myself from the rest of the world, from people I could have met, from a community of people. I was isolating. It was unnecessarily restrictive, and it was creating scarcity in my life. When I got down to the root cause of it, that sacred cow was restrictive. And they're also difficult to break. A lot of times it's really hard to break those sacred cows, but it is worth it when you do. There's freedom beyond it if you can have the courage to break them. Often you find that, as our core values are often difficult to practice, but rewarding when we do practice them. You find that sacred cows are, easy to continue to practice on a day-to-day basis, but they also constrain you in the long term, and they build resentment and toxicity, addiction and pain and all of that stuff. So, while they're kind of easy in the moment, for the long term, they're definitely not easy. So how do you acknowledge, or how do you begin to transform your life into something that is more in alignment with core values instead of sacred cows? How do you identify those sacred cows and change them in your life? Well, one of the best first ways to do that is to really look at where you start to think about your core, or think about the things that you value, think about the things that you do on a daily basis, and think about where it causes that internal conflict. Chances are somewhere in there you have a sacred cow that you might be leaning into, that a belief that you may not need to hold anymore, or something that you may need to break that anchor from. And then it comes down to identifying the core values and making sure that you stick closely to them and reevaluate them on a frequent basis, whether it be personally in your own life or professionally in your career or your business. So this comes down to thinking about your experiences in your past. Think about the memories that you have in your own life. These are important for identifying core values. The positive memories and the good memories. First, let's take a really, really great memory that you have. Maybe it was a vacation you went on, a person that you met, or an experience that you had. And think about what made it great. What was it that made it great? What part of your soul was touched because of the greatness that experience had? Was it that it just sparked your sense of adventure? Was it that it just gave you this feeling of love? Was it that you found this connection? Those are root words for core values: connection, love, adventure. Think about those words that pop up when you think about that experience. What are those instinctual words? And just brain dump the words that are associated with that great memory. And then when you're done with that memory, think about those the experiences that you've had that weren't the greatest times, that were not that were a terrible time. Maybe it was a bad experience. And obviously be careful with this. Don't trigger something that's very, very traumatic for you. Maybe work with someone that you trust on this. But think about that bad experience and think about the part of your soul that touched. Think about the way in which it impacted you, or the way that it made you angry or resentful or scared or what have you. Often in the feeling that you have in those moments, in those feelings that weren't so great, in those feelings of loss or grief, that's also a point that can rise up, that can surface a core value. So it doesn't mean that you might value loss or anything like that. No, the point is to look at the opposite. The thing that if something makes you angry or sad, oftentimes you can look at the feeling that hits. Maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's grief, and maybe it's just something terribly uncomfortable, but it's a feeling that doesn't serve you and isn't great. Maybe it's shame. And then you can look at the opposite as a core value, as an aspirational value that you have. And so those are a couple of ways in which you can do that. And then as you go through life, so that's the way you can kind of glean your core values from your experiences. As you brain dump those things, really start to reflect and journal on each one of them. And then as you go forward, you want to become really self-aware about the things that fill you up. What are the things that create energy for you when you go through life? When is energy created for you? Do you feel that you're more energized within a crowd of people, like within a group, within a community? Maybe connection is a core value for you. Do you feel energized when you're selling and when you're winning on the phone and you're closing deals and things like that? Maybe achievement is a core value for you. Maybe it is love. Maybe it's those moments of deep intimacy that give you that energy. What are those points that give you energy? And where is your gut? And another question to ask yourself is, where has your gut told you that you felt like really icky about something, like a decision you made, like you just don't feel good about it? I mean, that's creating that internal conflict too, that tells you that maybe one of your core values is compromised, and you can begin to surface and squeeze out what that core value really is. And when you can do these things, that's always helpful to you. So and a final question to ask yourself: when you watch movies or when you read books or when you listen to stories, what do you tend to be attracted to? And more important than that, what really grasps at your soul? What touches you deeply the most in your heart? Like when you hear these stories, what taps into those emotions? Because those stories that you hear, maybe those movies that are played, have a central theme about a value that you could bring out and actually consider your own. Stories are so powerful for us, and they can give us great and deep meaning. And that's really how we can find our core values in those moments. And if you can like look at that and be self-aware about, where your core values are on a frequent basis, maybe this is an annual exercise you go through, but that will help you to lean more into your core values and find alignment with them, rather than just settling for living with sacred cows, which hold us back and prevent us from living our best lives. and in the worst circumstances, cause us to lean into very toxic behaviors that could be self-destructive. So whether it's in your business or your personal life, start to be aware of where your sacred cows are, and be conscious of how you can gradually and systematically break the chains to those sacred cows and begin to live more in alignment with your core values. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.